Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello, this is Matt Truman. Thank you for downloading this episode. Thank you for sharing with a friend. Today on the podcast, we have a lot to talk about. At the end, we're going to talk about my hometown, Huber Heights. We'll talk about that at the end. But today we're going to discuss COVID news. We're going to discuss the Russia-NATO situation. That's an ongoing situation, folks. It's one not many are following and not many are reporting on, but it is heating up today. I spent all day listening to NPR. NPR, National Public Radio. That is a propaganda machine if I ever heard one. All day it was Omicron, January 6th, Mark Meadows. It was nuts. And most of it was, at best, lies. At worst, serious propaganda. Anyway, let's start with the Russia-NATO situation. From the Express, Russia marches one step closer to war. Ukraine opens bomb shelters after World War III alert. Ukraine has opened bomb shelters in Kiev as Russia looks to spark a global conflict following a World War III warning. Ukraine has opened bomb shelters in the capital of the nation as fears of a Russian invasion soar. On Wednesday, a Ukraine minister and former top spy warned the conflict could spread globally. That's what a lot of us are worried about. I hope it doesn't. She added, if Russia will invade, you should also take care about the Balkans. What Russians are doing now in Serbia, they try to provoke a situation in the Balkans. But we also take into account the beginning of World War II. Washington Post opinion. To deter a Russian attack, Ukraine needs to prepare for guerrilla warfare. Opinion. To deter a Russian attack, Ukraine needs to prepare for guerrilla warfare. With Russia mobilizing 175,000 troops along Ukraine's borders, Europe is facing the prospect of its biggest war since 1945, World War II. Western leaders are warning Russian President Vladimir Putin of massive consequences should he decide to invade. The West could target the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which would carry Russian natural gas to Germany. Go after the ill-gotten gains that Putin and his cronies have stashed in the West, and even kick Russia out of the SWIFT system of interbank transfers, but Putin has endured economic sanctions since his initial invasion of Ukraine in 2014. As you know, in 2014, they annexed Crimea, and he is still menacing as ever. Preventing Russia from attacking will require a more credible military deterrent. President Biden has ruled out unilaterally sending U.S. combat troops to Ukraine, which would be the strongest deterrent, but he can still do more to help the Ukrainians defend themselves. Yes, Biden will not send U.S. troops to the Ukraine. However, back in July, the National Guard was in Ukraine during a mission. It was the Florida National Guard's 53rd Infantry Combat Team, known as Task Force Gator. They took over a mission from the Washington State's National Guard, the 81st Stryker Brigade Combat Team. Combat teams are just amalgamation of soldiers. You got medics, you have infantry, you have commo guys, you have just a bunch of different folks in combat teams. So we've had National Guard troops over there before. Are there still National Guard soldiers over there? So when Biden says we're not sending more troops than what we already have over there, right, as a deterrent, right there on Russia's door. CNN, December 10th, 2021, U.S. small arms and ammo arrive in Ukraine as Pentagon details troops to train country's military. Part of a $60 million security assistance package, including small arms and ammunition, was delivered to Ukraine on Thursday, according to State Department officials and the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, but a final delivery containing 4 counter-mortar radars is still scheduled for early next year. President Joseph Biden, let's go Brandon, approved the package on September 1st as Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky visited the White House. The assistance included lethal elements such as Javelin anti-tank missiles, as well as non-lethal elements, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said Wednesday. And that Wednesday would have been the 8th of December. So if you don't know, currently our country sits at DEFCON 3. What does that mean? If you want, you can visit defconlevel.com. It'll show and tell all about these different levels, but we currently sit at DEFCON 3. The current DEFCON level overall is now at DEFCON 3 today, as there is a raised CENTCOM due to a U.S. drone strike on a vehicle near Benesh, and a raised EUCOM level due to the United States activating a artillery command in Europe as Russia amasses troops and artillery near the Ukrainian border, and raise AFRICOM level due to an ongoing conflict in Ethiopia. So there's a lot of things happening all over the world. These are things we need to pay attention to. Right now, Omicron is running the news, and we should all be scared so we can be put in lockdown or be forced to get a vaccine or be forced to put on a mask or be forced to do whatever, a number or a myriad of things that governments want us to do. Carrying on. I'm trying to run through this news real quick, folks, so we can get on to other topics today. But it's actually very important. So I'm going to read a couple more news stories. You know what? Let's play a clip. I think those are entertaining. Let's do that.
Veterans of the front line, taking a moment's rest before heading back to the fight. Though for now, they're only acting. It's a film about Ukraine's war with Russian-backed separatists in the east. Yet many of these actors have fought in the actual conflict. Life and art intertwined. They're also ready to switch mock guns for real ones again if needed.
We wait with our military bags every day, and I'm ready in 1 second back to my brigade and take a weapon and resist for Russian aggression.
It's not just a challenge for Ukraine. This minister was previously a top officer in the Ukrainian equivalent of MI5, and she has a warning.
If Russia will invade, you should also take care now about Balkans. What Russians are doing now in Serbia, they try to provoke situation in Balkans, but we also take into account the World War II beginning.
Well, I mean, I don't want to over-exaggerate, but is there a chance that an invasion in Ukraine could even trigger a World War III?
Yeah, because geopolitically it looks like possible scenario.
Despite the gloomy words, the streets of Kiev feel more festive than fearful. Yes, Vladimir Putin has mobilized tens of thousands of troops and moved tanks closer to Ukraine's border. But some here suspect the Russian president might simply be bluffing, using the threat of an attack as a weapon in itself to alarm the West into agreeing to new demands that would further weaken this country without the need for all-out war. A former leader in Ukraine's 2014 revolution says Putin's actions have already grabbed the attention of the US president downwards.
It's very typical Soviet-Russian approach for, to just create that military threat, and to start looking for concessions.
Whether through bluster, belligerence, or both, this crisis with Russia is real and very unpredictable. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Kiev.
All right, what do you guys think about that? You think Vladimir Putin is just fainting? Doing a little trickaroo, trying to get NATO to accept his red line demands, which are essentially keeping Ukraine from joining NATO, because Ukraine borders Russia, obviously. So do you think it's just a feint? I don't know. He did annex Crimea. Was this all a part of the plan? We'll annex Crimea because we know we can do that. And then we'll take over the Donbass region, which Donetsk, remember we talked about Donetsk in a previous podcast. Well, the Donbass region is, the eastern portion of Ukraine. So there's a divide there. Eastern and Western Ukraine. The separatists are battling the Ukraine proper, if you will, and over there from the Donbass region. Donetsk, that airport, that was the big battle throughout the years, these latter years. Anyway, what do you guys think? truepodcast@gmail.com. We can talk about it, or come over to True Podcast page on Facebook. We're over there as well. All right, so the last podcast, I think we talked about President Joseph R. Biden. Let's go, Brandon. And President Vladimir Putin having a video conference. Do you think Putin only met with Biden? Oh, no. Oh, no, sir. Ma'am. No, that's not how it went down. He also met with Xi Jinping from China. Here's a report from our friends over in India, WION News.
Let's shift to America's rivals now, Russia and China. What are they up to? There's a flurry of diplomacy happening between Moscow and Beijing. Presidents Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping met virtually today. They were waving and smiling like high school buddies. But is there more to this relationship? Is it only about taking on the US, or does the China-Russia relationship have other meaningful intentions? The chemistry is certainly there. Both Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping know how to put on a show. You may remember their famous ice cream date, or the time Xi Jinping called the Russian president his best friend. Well, that chemistry was on full display today. Take a look.
Dear President Xi Jinping, dear friend, I'm glad to see you. I'm greeting you. I'm glad to have a chance to get in touch with a direct video call. This allows us to thoroughly discuss Russian-Chinese relations, full-scale partnership, and strategic interaction. Dear friend, dear President Xi Jinping, next February I expect we can finally meet in person in Beijing as we have agreed. We will hold talks and then participate in the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympic Games. I'm grateful for your invitation to attend this landmark event.
This equation was never in doubt. Both Russia and China agree on most foreign policy issues. On Iran, on Syria, on Venezuela, and on North Korea. Bilateral trade is also growing. It is expected to reach $200 billion by 2024. I know it sounds like a perfect relationship. The leaders love each other, the foreign policies align, and trade is growing. But you know what? No relationship is perfect. Both Russia and China want more. They want a military partnership. Xi Jinping pitched this proposal during the talks. He said Russia and China must jointly safeguard each other's security interests. How did Vladimir Putin respond? Well, last year he said such a prospect cannot be ruled out, and since then things have moved in this direction. Just look at the timeline. In August, Russia and China held joint military drills. For the first time, Russian soldiers trained on Chinese soil. October, 10 Russian and Chinese warships sailed through the Sea of Japan. Again, unprecedented. November, 4 Chinese and Russian bombers flew over the East China Sea. South Korea ended up scrambling jets in response. In the same month, China and Russia also signed a roadmap for military cooperation. It runs from 2021 to 2025. So the trajectory is clear. Russian and Chinese militaries are joining hands. We're seeing more joint drills, more joint patrols. But all of this is happening in the Pacific theater. What about Europe? President Putin has deployed thousands of troops near Ukraine. What has China said about that? Well, nothing so far. If Russia is wading into the Pacific, why isn't China helping out in Europe? I can think of a few reasons. Number one, Russia has a 290-year-old Pacific fleet. It's no stranger to this region, but China has no such foothold in Europe. Reason number two, Eastern Europe is on China's wish list. It is their ticket to influencing Brussels, and most of Eastern Europe is wary of Russia's buildup. So there are gaps. Nonetheless, this alliance is bad news for the West. It's basically a two-front threat. Russian troops and artillery in Eastern Europe and Chinese warships in the Pacific, two nuclear powers, two strong armies. What about the other side? Well, you have a reluctant France, a Britain consumed by domestic politics, a Europe divided over China, and then the United States, led by Joe Biden. Can Joe Biden spread his military so thin? Remember, he's also negotiating a nuclear deal with Iran. If that fails, this becomes a three-front threat: Europe, West Asia, and the Pacific. The fact is, Biden cannot break this new alliance, the Russia-China alliance. His sanctions will only drive them closer. So what can the West do? Perhaps play the waiting game. Beneath all of this chemistry, the Russia-China relationship is far from perfect. We are talking about two expansionist powers, two leaders with big ambitions. How long before the bickering starts? China has big plans for Central Asia, but it has always been Russia's backyard. Chinese nationalists make territorial claims in Russia's Far East. Putin will not take kindly to such assertions. You see, an alliance between equals never really works. Take NATO, for example. It works because America is far superior to the other members. It's clear who's boss. Can Russia and China forge such an alliance? They will have to make lasting commitments then. Promise to defend each other. Align their militaries. It depends on Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping's ego, basically, because chances are they'll both be president for life. And until then, you can expect strong bilateral exchanges. Putin is slated to visit Beijing for the Winter Olympics. Russia is selling gas to avert China's power shortage. It's a strong relationship between two powerful countries. But that power is also their kryptonite, because where there is power, there is ambition and ego.
All right, folks. When you listen to that report, one thing really, truly stands out. This year, the Winter Olympics will happen in China. China and Russia make this alliance. If Ukraine is to be invaded by Russia, I make a prediction now. It won't happen until after the Winter Olympics, or maybe toward the end of the Winter Olympics. But I would say after the Winter Olympics. If Putin really wants to invade Ukraine, that's when it'll happen. He's not going to screw up China's thing with the Olympics, because it's billions of dollars for their country. You guys heard that the U.S. is looking to boycott the Winter Olympics in China, right?
The White House has announced a diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games, which are due to start next February. The move's been broadly welcomed across the political divide in the States, although it only applies to diplomatic and political figures, not the actual athletes who've been given White House approval to take part. Tanya Dendrinos reports.
Beijing 2022. As the snow settles, Olympic venues are taking shape, but the pinnacle of sport is no stranger to politics. With 2 months remaining, the US has announced a diplomatic boycott, saying it won't contribute to the fanfare nor pretend it's business as usual in the face of China's egregious human rights record.
The Biden administration will not send any diplomatic or official representation to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games, given the PRC's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang and other human rights abuses.
There is precedent here, but the move falls short of the 1980 US-led boycott of the Moscow Games, where Team USA athletes were pulled from the competition.
The athletes will be participating. We will be rooting for the athletes from home. I am an Olympics-obsessed person, so I'm looking forward to doing that. But I think this is just an indication that it cannot be business as usual, that not sending a diplomatic delegation sends that message.
But is Beijing paying attention? Judging by the reaction of the Foreign Ministry in a press conference prior to official confirmation from the US, labelling it wishful thinking, grandstanding and politically manipulative, the answer is yes.
What the US should do is to correct its attitude, practice a more united Olympic spirit, and take China's concerns seriously. Do not politicize sports and stop calling for the so-called diplomatic boycott of the Beijing Winter Olympics, so as not to affect the dialogue and cooperation between China and the US in important areas. If the US insists on willfully clinging to its course, China will definitely take resolute countermeasures.
The UK and Australia are among other nations considering a Beijing boycott, a move backed by human rights organisations, which have long argued China should never have been awarded the Games to begin with. As they edge closer, it seems concerns are reaching a crescendo. Tanya Dandrinos, BBC News.
And our China correspondent, Robin Brandt, explains what will be the fallout from this boycott and what countermeasures China is likely to take.
Well, I think the first thing to consider here is that this was heavily telegraphed. So this is not a big surprise, and it is consistent in terms of some confrontation, some competition and some cooperation in terms of how the Biden administration views China. But it is a snub, it is a slight, and it was designed to do that. This is designed to highlight, as you just heard, the Biden administration's ongoing concerns about what it views as genocide being committed by China against its own people in the West. So it's important to see it in all of that context. So China says it will react in a kind of a like-for-like way. It's tough to see how it can do that. The US, is not due to host a similar event soon, although Los Angeles in 2028 has the Summer Games. I'll be looking for how perhaps the officials accompanying some of the American athletes that come here in the coming weeks, how they are treated. How will the American athletes be treated as well? And will there be the classic but nonetheless quite effective, maybe some pressure, some action, some measures against US companies operating here, particularly those associated with the Games? That's one way that Beijing also could demonstrate its dissatisfaction with this decision.
All right, there was a report from BBC News about the boycott of the Winter Olympics in China. And it's all about this genocide, as they said, slave labor. Marco Rubio partnered up with Representative Jim McGovern from Massachusetts. He's a Democrat. So this was a bipartisan bill. The Politico writes, the headline is Crackdown on China's Treatment of Muslim Minority Headed to Biden's Desk. And this is from December the 16th, 2021. I'll read the first few paragraphs for you, and then we'll play a clip from Fox News. So, Politico article. The Senate on Thursday unanimously passed a bill to crack down on the Chinese government's genocide targeting Uyghur Muslims, sending the measure to President Joe Biden's desk for his signature. So this bill's been passed, but let's listen to that Fox News clip with Marco Rubio.
Where bipartisanship on the same issue about China and human rights on the House floor. Let's bring in Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio, who sits on the Intelligence and Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thanks for being here. What about what's being done when it comes to China and the Olympics? Is it enough in your mind, and what should be done?
Well, there's two things at play here. Obviously, the first is doing the right thing, right? I mean, calling these things out should matter, irrespective of how powerful that country is or how important they are geopolitically. But the other thing that there's evidence of here that's pretty clear is how dependent our economy has become on China. When I say our economy, it's the things we buy at stores, but it's also our corporations. I mean, we've got large, very influential, powerful organizations in our country in the business sector who rely on the access to the Chinese market and production in China for their bottom line. I mean, it is for them too valuable now to jeopardize. And I think that's true for the National Basketball Association. I think that's been true for Nike, for Apple, and a host of others. And that includes, I imagine, NBC as well with the coverage of the Olympic Games. I mean, if their coverage gets out of line, they could very well be barred from sending journalists there to cover an athletic competition. So I think that what we're seeing here is evidence that of how deeply intertwined they become into our economy and how much control it gives them over what we get to see, watch, buy, how much we pay for things, and what our companies are willing to say.
You know, in a speech you delivered today, you referenced Bill Clinton making this statement back in 2000 about pushing for China to be a part of the WTO. Take a listen.
We have a far greater chance of having a positive influence on China's actions if we welcome China into the world community instead of shutting it out. By joining the WTO, China is not simply agreeing to import more of our products. It is agreeing to import one of democracy's most cherished values, economic freedom.
You called that silly and wrong. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think with 20 years of hindsight, that I believe that speech was about 20 years ago this very week. I think when you listen to those words now, that's actually not what's happened. But what we've done is we've exported jobs. We've sent American jobs, American manufacturing capability. We exported that to China. China took it. They made our companies dependent. In many cases, they actually, stole the secrets of those companies, and now those companies are no longer there because they're doing it instead. And they've made us incredibly dependent on them to produce all kinds of things that we now rely on, including to defend our country. They've also become a place now where, we have a finance market now, a stock market and a Wall Street, where you've got major American investment funds that are investing in companies that are developing weapons that will one day potentially be designed and aimed to kill American servicemen and women. And that's been the outcome of the last 20 years. It was a bad decision based on flawed assumptions, and now we're seeing the consequences of it.
Is there a responsibility for lawmakers to be talking to these companies or to the NBA or to others who they feel are doing the wrong things by interacting and dealing with China?
I think there is, and I think that's what's happening. But ultimately, you have to understand that all these companies that are publicly traded, they have quarterly reports. And if they get kicked out of China, their profits are going to go down, their costs are going to go up, and they're going to have to answer to their shareholders. So they're basically now in a trap that creates a situation in which we have American companies who benefit from being here in the United States and our laws and our system. American companies who consistently advocate now for policies or against, they advocate for policies that are good for China and bad for America because of what it would mean to their bottom line. So it's a very difficult situation to unwind now, but we have to. We have no choice. This cannot continue on this trend line, or the world's going to look very different 10 or 20 years from now.
You think the Biden administration is weak on China?
I do, and I think they're weak on China because they're divided. I think there are some people that recognize this threat, and I think there are others that are practitioners and believers in the failed bipartisan consensus that brought it to this point. And then you got John Kerry, which is a breed unto himself. John Kerry wants to do a climate deal with China, and he doesn't want to say or do anything that forces or creates a ruckus with the Chinese, because he's hoping that his legacy in life is going to be that he cut some deal with the Chinese on climate change, which, by the way, the Chinese won't keep because they don't keep any deal that's bad for them.
Candidate Trump and then President Trump talked a lot about China. Do you think former President Trump is getting back in this race?
I don't know. You'll have to ask him. I mean, I believe that if he runs, he's going to be the party's nominee. He's the most well-known and popular Republican among Republicans in the country. I don't have any idea as to what he's going to do, and he doesn't have to make that decision now.
But for you, you've mended ways after all the 2016 back and forth?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, I would tell people that when President Trump was president of the United States, I got a lot of good things done for Florida and for our country. We had a very good working relationship, and I don't, at the end of the day, we didn't agree on everything, but he seemed to always respect that. I don't believe he said a single negative word about me since the day I stopped running for president. So we had a good working relationship, which is possible, with people you don't agree with 100% of the time. But I do give him a lot of credit on China. I mean, the orthodoxy of the Republican Party and much of our politics was not what it is, was something very different. And he challenged that as a candidate, and I think he deserves credit for it.
Senator Marco Rubio, we appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
There was Brett Baer and Marco Rubio talking about the China situation with their humanitarian rights issues and the new law that just passed and is, as we said, waiting on Biden's desk. Let's move into COVID news real quick. Let's talk a little bit about COVID. And if you have not listened to the latest Joe Rogan experience with Dr. Peter McCullough, you need to. Here's just a little, we're going to just cram it all into one. This is one big clip, but this is from the Joe Rogan experience. You can get it over on Spotify with the Truman's Town Hall podcast and the Gospel Message podcast. If you're not listening to the Gospel Message, then you're wrong. Anyway, here's a little bit of the clip from the Joe Rogan experience, Dr. Peter A. McCullough.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan podcast by night, all day.
Well, sir, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I've seen a lot of your testimonies before they were actually taken down. I've seen some of the videos that were yours that were taken down off of YouTube, and then I found that very odd that a doctor talking about a medical disease would have videos taken down. An actual expert would be either testifying or discussing treatments and talking about a disease and have those videos taken down off of YouTube. First of all, if you would please just state your credentials and tell everybody what you do.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm an internist and cardiologist. I'm also trained in epidemiology. I'm in academic practice in Dallas, Texas. So I see patients about half the time. I saw patients yesterday. I drove down today to see you here in the studio. And the rest of my time I spend as an author, an editor. I'm an editor of a major journal in cardiovascular medicine, the former editor of an international journal. I'm the president of a major medical society right now, currently, about 5 years into that position. And, I frequently publish. I'm in my field, I study the interface between heart and kidney disease. I'm the most published person in my field in history. I have over 650 publications in the National Library of Medicine. I imagine that's probably ahead of anybody you've had on the show. They mentioned Paul Merrick. I'm just ahead of Paul Merrick. Pierre Corey had mentioned him in critical care. I'm just ahead of Paul, a lot younger than he is. And in COVID, when COVID hit, I really dropped everything to put all of my academic efforts on this because I saw it as an all-hands-on-deck situation.
So the compromise of the immune system that comes about from obesity, is it scalable? Is it like if you are 100 pounds overweight, is it much worse than if you're 40 pounds overweight?
It's clearly scalable.
So that's something that should have been discussed publicly, along with the drugs, along with the possible early treatment options.
Well, if we could have, in a perfect world, if we addressed all 4 pillars of the pandemic response, if we did what Bangladesh did and just start actually doing the oral nasal hygiene approach.
Is that what they did right away?
That's where the trials were done. They're almost down to zero COVID. There's 160 million people. They're on top of each other over there. They're down to almost zero COVID because they've got the discipline down to when they go out in public settings. When you went out with that guy with a headache, when you came home, just do the oral nasal decontamination, you would have knocked down the viral particles enough where your body probably would have fought off the rest and you don't get the syndrome. Do you know my patients right now, when they're coming down with COVID, we actually blast with the dilute povidone iodine in the nose and the mouth, we blast every 4 hours while awake, and we knock down the viral load, particularly with Delta. Delta has 251 to 1,000 times viral load in the nose, so it's replicating like mad, and we can knock it down and reduce the amount of viral inoculum in the human body. I personally had COVID, Joe. It was in the fall of 2020. I didn't know about this. It baked in my nose and mouth for about 3 days. And I sat there, I did nothing. I was scrambling for oral drugs. Why didn't I knock it down with some type of treatment in the nose? You know, chronic sinusitis patients have been using neti pots, or they've been using saline rinses. All we have to do is add a little peroxide or a little bit iodine to that and knock down the viral load. I could have had a much milder syndrome. That means it's it. I'm an epidemiologist by training. This is my line of work. I'm telling you, for a large number of individuals, the vaccine has caused death and these vaccine-induced organ injury syndromes.
Why is it that it doesn't affect most people this way? If you look at the vast majority of people that have been vaccinated, and that's one of the things that we have to go on in this country, is that literally, it's over 200 million people, I believe, have been vaccinated. That's an enormous amount of human beings. Most of them are fine. Is that an accurate statement?
You know, it's just, again, just like the respiratory infection. You know, we've had 146 million people who've had the respiratory infection. Less than 1%'s died.
Right, but the ones that have gotten the injection and died or got myocarditis versus the ones who got the injection and nothing happened at all. What's the difference? What happened?
Just like the respiratory infection. Remember, you and I had the respiratory infection. We're perfectly fine. We're sitting here talking. 99% of people who got the respiratory infection are fine. 99% of people who got the vaccine are fine. So we're 200 million people who got the vaccines, and we have about 1 million people injured. So it's the same. They're identically the same. It's the same concept.
So what do you think is causing the damage in the 1%?
Just like with the respiratory infection, it's all about susceptibility. Remember, in the respiratory infection, it's the elderly, those with medical problems, those with comorbidities. It's the same thing. So with the vaccine, it's the elderly. It's with comorbidities. For instance, blood clotting. Those who have inherited proclivity to blood clotting are going to be the ones who are likely to going to form the fatal blood clots that happen with the vaccine. Invariably, there's going to be some determinants of who develops the myocarditis. We have a lead on this, by the way. The myocarditis is not equal in terms of gender. It's running about 80% boys and 20% girls, so it must be some relationship.
Well, I'm glad you said boys and not men, because that's what I'm asking you about. Like, these are not people that have a susceptibility to a disease. They don't have a pre-existing condition. They're young people, and they're getting myocarditis. So what is causing that?
In a paper from Finland, an important paper done before COVID-19, where they collected all the myocarditis cases in Finland before COVID-19, they established kind of who got it and what was the rate. And in that paper, I believe the first author is Tishopi, what it showed was that there is an age gradient that occurs as one goes from, age 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, very, very little. And then once approaches puberty, it goes up. After age 12, it really goes up, 12 to 17 or 18. And it runs about 80% boys, 90% boys. And importantly, the number per million, you could actually calculate the number per million per year, came out to 4 cases per million per year. So if you figure that we have, let's make it easy math. Let's say we have 70 million kids in the United States, and we do, so 70 times 4, that would be 280 kids with myocarditis. Some people say, add on some teenagers or other people, we could get to 700, 800 cases of myocarditis per year. Do you know what we're in affairs right now, Joe? 13,000 certified cases of myocarditis, pericarditis. I know because I've reported some. So some kids have come to my clinic. They've had heart inflammation. We know in a paper by Tracy Hogue from UC Davis, thousands of cases of myocarditis from VAERS and V-Safe, 86% of these kids have to be hospitalized.
And so this is why you believe that at least 50% of those people those deaths could have been prevented.
That was in November of 2020 under sworn testimony. That number's easily 85% now. Maybe it's 90% now if we got what you got. If you got the sequence multi-drug treatment, monoclonal antibodies, you called it the kitchen sink, so do I. Bottom line is it may be refined over time. The Merck and Pfizer drug, we'll bring them in. If other drugs come along, we'll refine it. Listen, it's a process. I'm not saying any one of these drugs is a miracle drug. None of them are necessary nor sufficient to save a life. But the point is, what drives hospitalization is uncontrollable symptoms. It's uncontrollable anxiety. Do you know an anxiety drug itself actually cuts off the risk of hospitalization? And that drug is fluvoxamine.
I was going to ask you about
fluvoxamine
that. Yeah.
takes an edge off the dyspnea. It may have some...
Is that an SSRI?
It's an SNRI, and it's an older one, but it takes an edge off. It may have some other unique effects. I mean, I give credit to those who have advanced it. Credit to Steve Kirsch, who's funded the COVID-19 early treatment program, and he's now funding the vaccine injury program. You know, Steve Kirsch, by the way, has a great offer out there for your listeners. I don't know if you know about this.
No.
His offer is anybody from any major academic medical center or any government agency who will come to the table and have a fair discussion on vaccine safety and efficacy. He'll pay him $2 million.
Wow. One thing that we've been talking about recently that concerns me, and I wanted to know what your thoughts on this were, seeing as you spent your life in the medical establishment. My concern is that corporations, their goal is to continually make more money. Every year, they'd like to make more money than the last. This year, for the pharmaceutical companies, it's been an insanely profitable year because of the vaccines. I have a real concern, and I wonder if you share this concern, that they're going to try to continue to make the same amount of money. And the best way to do that is to continue to encourage people to be vaccinated and to create new vaccines, even if they're not necessarily the right thing to do.
If it's about making money, I'd almost prefer the vaccines get full FDA approval. You know, none of the vaccines are FDA approved.
Right.
Even Pfizer's not FDA approved. That was a false talking point. Pfizer has a continuation of the EUA. BioNTech, which is not in the United States, got a biological licensing agreement. That still means they have to do a lot to get approved. They have to actually have a approved package insert. They have to commit to post-marketing studies on myocarditis. They have to give safety warnings on pregnancy. They're not there yet. So no product is approved in the United States. They're all emergency use authorized. Everybody needs to know that. Another false talking point, that Pfizer was approved on August 23rd, went all the way up to the President of the United States. Since when in history do we have false talking points issued out of FDA meetings that go up to the President of the United States? So they're not approved. Listen, everybody's entitled to make some money. What seems unfair about this? What seems unfair about this is the government paid for the development costs. The government pre-purchased the products, even before they knew it was going to work or not work. And we know that with a new pharmaceutical company, a new product that was developed by a pharmaceutical company, whether it's a new company or existing company, we know a benchmark for a blockbuster drug would be $1 billion of sales in its first year. That's a benchmark. And typically half of that billion is spent on the sales force. There's a investment of billions of dollars in R&D. Do you know with the vaccines that Pfizer in its first year hit $33 billion? And now I think next year, $36 billion. No development costs.
That's just a snippet of that entire interview with Dr. Peter McCullough. Joe Rogan Experience, Spotify, check it out. So in this spirit of fairness and balanced, fair and balanced, no, this is not Fox News. But in the spirit of fairness, let's listen to this clip.
We want to obviously catch up with your latest views on Omicron. I mean, firstly, on its transmissibility, what's your latest take there?
Well, unfortunately, it's looking like, as advertised, coming out of South Africa and the UK, meaning that it is more transmissible than Delta. And of course, Delta was more transmissible than Alpha, and Alpha was more transmissible than the original lineage. So you're looking at something that is super jazzed up in terms of its ability to affect large populations. And that's going to be extremely disruptive now in the United States. I was hoping that we'd have about a 4 to 6 week window before it came over from the UK to the US, because that's what happened with the Alpha variant and the Delta variant. Doesn't look like we're going to get that lucky. It's pretty much here now and accelerating. And you're talking about the NFL and the NBA season. It's going to be very tough to continue the NFL and the NBA season now for the next few weeks. I think the best case scenario is we see this as a major surge from now and say to the middle of January, and then it starts to go down, and then we could pick things up afterwards. But so that's problem number one. Problem number two, we still have Delta here, so it's not like Delta's entirely gone away. So problem three is Omicron is not necessarily a mild illness as many people are touting. I think it may turn out to be pretty much like the other lineages. And so you've got this very screaming high level of transmission now starting up across the country. Maybe as many as 20% of the variants in New York and New Jersey are the Omicron variant, and it's only going to get worse and as we move into the holiday season. And then the last piece is, how are we going to sustain it all in terms of the health system? Because we're seeing so many breakthrough symptomatic illness, even with individuals with 3 immunizations. So trying to keep our healthcare workforce together and showing up for work, I think, not that they're going to get very, very sick, but sick enough to be home, I think that's going to present an added problem. So no question, we're going to have a really tough challenge now for the next 4 or 5 weeks.
So you said that, Dr. Hodes, that you feel like Omicron will be as severe as some recent variants like Delta. You have evidence that tells you that, or it's just you don't have any evidence to suggest that it's less severe?
It's the latter. I'm not seeing really impressive evidence that it's less severe at this point. And exactly what the difference is in South Africa, whether the South African population is younger or differences in genetic background. It's not to say it won't happen. I just don't think we can count on it. We shouldn't be dismissive of the Omicron variant and just assume it's only going to be a cold. It may be for some people, but I think, remember, we have so many unvaccinated Americans, especially in certain parts of the country, like here in Texas and the South and in parts of the Mountain West. I think we have to plan for all hands on deck and that we're in for a pretty serious wave, in part because Delta is still here and in part because Omicron is also going to cause a lot of havoc as well.
And then there's that. That was NPR all day today. Omicron is going to kill us all. The NFL is over 90% vaccinated, yet they are going to cancel games because many of those who were vaccinated have contracted the coronavirus, as Cardi B said. I don't know, a little pop culture for you. You want to listen to some more fear-mongering? Let's do it. And before we do, remember, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
International concern this hour over a new coronavirus variant that scientists say could be more infectious than previous strains.
The WHO has now named this variant Omicron. They're also stressing that there is still a lot we don't yet know about this new variant.
The thing that's concerning scientists is the number of mutations this new variant contains, particularly in the spike protein, which is the bit of the virus that it uses to lock onto human cells and infect them. Just within the spike protein, it contains more than 30 mutations, and within the specific part of the spike protein that binds to the ACE2 receptor that's found on human cells, there are 10 mutations. Now, just for comparison, the Delta variant has 2 mutations in that receptor binding domain. Some of them seem to make it easier for the virus to infect cells, meaning it will be more contagious, more transmissible. And that potentially means that you need less virus to trigger an infection in somebody. The other key worrying thing is that Some of these mutations have been associated with more immune escape from antibodies that have been generated through previous infection or vaccination. The existing immune responses we have, those antibodies and those T-cell responses, they've come about through our immune cells looking at the spike protein and creating these immune cells that target specific bits of that protein, which may mean that if you've got antibodies from a previous infection, you're more likely to be reinfected with Omicron. And also if you've been double vaccinated, those vaccines will probably still work to some degree, but they may not be as effective as they were. The good news is that even a heavily mutated spike protein is still the virus's spike protein. It can't completely change that spike protein because that will no longer latch onto human cells. So there's a limit to how much the virus can change its proteins. Even if the virus has changed, 30 bits of that spike protein, there are still going to be some antibodies and there are still going to be some T cells that recognize different bits of that protein. So it's still really, really, really important that people go and get their vaccine. And what's also really important is boosters.
I can't take it. I had to stop that video. How many colds have you had? Common cold. The common cold is a coronavirus. How many colds have you had? You still catch a cold, maybe? Stuffy nose, sore throat, runny nose, headache. Common cold. They are variants of the common cold. Coronaviruses will have variants forever. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in this forever unless we decide, okay, we're in this forever. Let's just get used to it and live with it. Do what you want. You want to get vaccinated? Go ahead, get vaccinated. You want to take vitamin C, vitamin D, quercetin, zinc, vitamin A, multivitamin. Drink plenty of water, get plenty of rest, lose weight. Don't be a fat body running around. Come on, folks. Let's have a listen to this, shall we?
Hey, man, I'm having some trouble. What's wrong? Well, you know how the world's been drastically changing the past 2 years? No, I honestly haven't noticed. Well, I'm finding it harder and harder to stay in denial about what's really going on. Sounds tough. Yeah, I want to stay more committed to being wrong rather than admitting that I was wrong. But I'm struggling because things are getting pretty obvious. So you're having trouble staying in denial? Yes. Well, that's where you're going wrong. Denial isn't enough anymore. You need to be in denial that you're in denial. Oh, so like 2 layers of denial? Exactly. So you're not in denial? No, not at all. Oh, I see. You're in denial that you're in denial. Precisely. It's kind of like blissful intelligence, except it's numbness and not intelligent instead. That's inspirational. Oh, did you see the leader of the EU wants to get rid of the Nuremberg Code? Isn't the Nuremberg Code that thing that was put in place after the Nazis' genocide of the Jewish people under the guise of medicine and science in order to protect the population from that same thing ever happening again? Sure is. But I think now they're wanting to get rid of what protects people in order to better protect people. Wouldn't that open the door for the same thing to happen again? Probably, but I don't think that's the question they want us to ask. What question do they want us to ask? How many of those 3 scumbag white people that Kyle Rittenhouse shot in self-defense were innocent black people that he murdered out of hate? I'd say at least 4, if not 5. And do you see how when we're talking about things like this, you've already forgotten about that important question that you asked? What question? Now we're talking. That's great. I read the other day that Webster's dictionary changed the definition of the word anti-vaxxer. Hey man, reading's uninclusive to people who are too dumb to read. I know. I'll write those idiots an apology letter tomorrow. Great. What'd they change the definition to? They changed the definition to include anyone who's against any law or mandate. I could imagine that it's important to occasionally change the definition of words in order to stay consistent with the truth that the word was originally designed to represent. Yeah, the new definition makes me think that totally sane people who just want their God-given right to freedom and body autonomy are insane. They couldn't be more insane, based on what the now less accurate dictionary tells me to think. Hey man, what's that? Oh, I just got the latest booster that was designed for 2 variants ago in order to protect me from the current variant. And now instead of a sticker, they just give you one of these. Looks cool. What's it mean? I don't know, but they told me it's what I am now. Powerful. A lot of people are getting microchipped now. Dude, that's a crazy conspiracy theory. Dude, it's been 2 years since we've been saying that, but people are doing it now. It's reality. Over 6,000 people in Sweden got microchipped. It's literally Stockholm Syndrome. Of course. How'd we survive so long not being microchipped and tracked by dangerous people that lie to us? I don't know, but could you imagine how convenient it would be not having to carry our papers and not having any freedoms because we got microchipped? It would be delightful. Oh, speaking of showing your papers, in Austria, now they've put unobedient, uninjected people into an indefinite lockdown. Even better than that, Austria passed a law that requires all citizens to be injected by February, and if they don't, they go to prison. I just wish they could be even more strict and more obvious with what they're really doing. What are they really doing? Well, obviously taking away all resemblance of freedom in order to protect their people from a disease with a very dangerously high rate of survival. You can only imagine what kind of dirt the cabal has on the Austrian leaders. Are authoritarian and Australian the same thing? No, Australia's the thing that the authoritarians have taken over. That's right. It's also the place where a long time ago they rounded up all the Aboriginals and treated them like they were less than human. Oh, and they're doing that again today. I wonder if they like it now. Well, I think they do because the Aboriginals recently sent out an SOS for international help against the current genocide they're facing because the now authoritarian Australian government is doing the same thing today under the guise of medicine and science. Can't get rid of the Nuremberg Code fast enough now, can we? They're also arresting teenagers for leaving their homes. Well, there's 2 sides to every story. And they're also putting people into camps. I love camping. Me too. And the largest protests in human history are happening every weekend in places like Australia, Germany, France, and Belgium, with people standing up against mandates. Well, because the mainstream media chooses to black them out, I refuse to acknowledge that they're happening because doing so would invalidate my whole commitment to not changing my mind since this whole thing began. I believe in science as well. But do you think history is repeating itself? Well, I mean, the faster the, what are they called again? The cabal? Right. The faster they can erase our records of history, the more we'll think the answer is no, which will help us go into peaceful slavery, well, more peacefully. Do you ever think we're in an endless pattern of new variant, fear-mongering, new lockdowns, new booster, more freedoms being eroded away? No, I'm pretty sure these first 3 times are the only times it'll happen. And besides, you get to upgrade your awareness to tunnel vision when you refuse to acknowledge patterns in life. I already don't know how to do that. And not knowing's half the battle. Well, I should get going. Where I live is currently not in a lockdown, but I want to go home and practice. Okay, but, what are you wearing that for? Well, the guys that abused me told me to wear it so I'm more controllable for my protection. You are lucky having them look out for you. Yeah, my soul has to leave my body just to cope with how well protected I allow myself to be. Bye-bye!
Wow. That was Awaken with JP. You can catch him on YouTube, Instagram. That's where I see him. Anyway, Awaken with JP. Great. Fantastic. That's about it for this episode. Thank you for downloading. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing with a friend. Are you sharing this podcast? If you are, I thank you. And we're going to end tonight. We're going to end this podcast with one of my faves, The Bound Report. So until next time, until next week, I think we'll be back on Christmas Day. I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Anywho, I leave you with the Bound Report. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate you downloading and sharing with a friend. Please share with a friend. Follow us at Doc Truman on Instagram and YouTube. Truman's Town Hall podcast on Facebook. You can listen to this podcast on just about anything. If you want to listen to this podcast utilizing Alexa, just say, Alexa, play Truman's Town Hall podcast. And you'll get it. There it is. We're on Audible as well, audible.com, where you buy books and stuff. We're everywhere. iHeartRadio, Spotify, everything. As well as the Gospel Message, all a part of the True Podcast Network. Anyway, we're looking to do more and better things in the new year. We'll be back on Christmas, and then we may take a little break. But I shall leave you with the Bound Report titled Assange is All of Us.
While China's arsenal of hypersonic weapons becomes more of an international threat as China's troops amass on the waters outside of Taiwan and the Atlantic coast of Africa.
Some observers have described a nightmare scenario where President Putin invades Ukraine and also simultaneously President Xi uses force to reunify Taiwan with China. Is the U.S. prepared to deal with such a scenario?
The United States is going to take every action that we can take from the point of view of both deterrence and diplomacy to make sure that the Taiwan scenario you just described never happens.
But if the Biden administration can't even wind down the nearly 20-year occupation of Afghanistan without military deaths and abandonment, wouldn't the real nightmare scenario be an inevitable Biden bungling of world war? And while corporocratic senators make reckless, veiled threats like these...
What does military action mean, Senator?
I would not rule out American troops on the ground. We don't rule out first-use nuclear action.
It is times like these that the skills of Julian Assange are vital to leveling the playing field for a populace continuously kept in the dark by the planners of the pandemic, the Great Reset, and the gradual infiltration of Chinese communism undermining Western civilization.
Light them all up. 202 traffic, 260. Come on, fire. Hey, Roger. Keep shooting.
11 people died in that attack, right? Including 2 Reuters employees.
Yeah, 2 Reuters employees, 2 young children were wounded. There were between 18 and 26 people killed altogether.
And releasing this caused widespread outrage. What was the key element of this that actually caused the outrage, do you think?
I don't know. I guess people can see the gross disparity in force. You have a guy who's walking in a relaxed way down the street, and then an Apache helicopter sitting up at 1 kilometre firing 30mm cannon shells on everyone, looking for any excuse to do so, and killing people, rescuing the wounded. And there was 2 journalists involved who clearly weren't insurgents because that's their full-time job.
Instead, Julian Assange, the 50-year-old founder of WikiLeaks, faces extradition from Britain to the United States after the U.S. government won an appeal in London's High Court, reportedly causing Julian Assange to suffer a stroke.
He didn't hack anybody's computers. He's a journalist. He reprinted facts that were deeply embarrassing to our political class, the Democratic National Committee, and to, above all, the foreign policy establishment, which has an awful lot to be embarrassed of. And for doing that, the New York Times has done things like that for 100 years, no problem. Julian Assange does it. Well, he's been incarcerated for almost a decade, since the summer of 2012.
The Biden administration has criminalized telling the truth with this indictment. And it's even worse than that, actually. They've criminalized knowing about classified information.
Why is getting your brother more important than bringing, say, murderers to justice?
People who run our democracies now would like to rule them with impunity. They don't want people to know what's been done in their name. They want to keep secrets. They don't want the public to be informed, basically. I think that's why. And they're making an example out of Julian. They're saying to people, if you tell the truth about our secrets, if you tell the truth about the security state or anything really, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to be locked in a prison for the rest of your life. Your reputation will be destroyed. You'll be taken away from your family.
If your brother is extradited to the United States, do you think he'll survive?
If he gets extradited, he will most likely die.
Assange was a weapon of the First Amendment, wrestling the documents that forced transparency from a secretive military and political industrial complex, hiding earth-shattering revelations that affect all of humanity and the future of the Republic. John Bound reporting.
Dad, you forgot about Huber Heights.
Oh, that's right. We did. We forgot about Huber Heights. All right, folks. If you stuck around this long for Huber Heights news, all right, let's see what we can do here. I reviewed the meetings, the past meetings. This was my favorite clip from the meetings. It's a citizen's comment. I love the citizens of Huber Heights. I think they are amazing, and I love it more when they get involved with the city government. Here it is.
Item 12B, an ordinance to amend Chapter 509, Disorderly Conduct and Peace Disturbance of Part 5, General Offenses Code of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Huber Heights by amending Section 509.08, disturbing the peace, and subsection B10 at the first reading.
Brian, additional comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No additional comments from staff at this time.
Okay, and the work session recommendation was to pass this on to a second reading, but we have citizen commentary this evening. Mr. Rogers?
Mr. Kyle Austin, if you please come to the podium.
Good evening. Thanks again for the time to speak.
Thank you for hanging out with us.
Oh, yeah. I was originally here on September 13th to address this concern of the construction that's been happening behind our house for the past 2 years. Every day, about 6 o'clock, they're back there working, Saturdays included, now beginning to start working on Sundays. We were instructed by council here that if we had any concerns to reach out to the police on the non-emergency line. We've done so. I've done that 5 times since the September 13th meeting. Every one of them, the police have informed me that they are not authorized by their superior to cite anybody in the construction zone for any noise ordinance problems. And then this past time, December 4th, when we called, the police officer that responded informed us that they are now allowed to be back there on Sundays even. And as long as they are not back there before 9 o'clock in the morning, then everything is fine. Well, they're starting at 7, and when we call them to come back there and do anything about it, they say, we've been told by the chief of police we can't do anything about it. So now I see in the council work session that was on 12/7 that there have been so many police complaints that the thought was to just go ahead and make Saturday a regular working day, and that'll eliminate the police complaints. And I'm struggling to understand the reasoning behind that. Of the council tells the people that if you have a problem with an ordinance, that the people, the construction crews are not following the rules, call the police. Well, and then when too many people call the police, well, let's just go ahead and make it legal then. I don't understand that. And this has been an ongoing issue for 2 years. Judging by the state of the construction zone now, we've got another 2 years before it's completed. I mean, we've got 7 in the morning, last Saturday, they're putting trusses up on a house. That's not a quiet project. You've got cranes lifting the trusses, air guns putting the nails in, everything, 30 yards behind our house at 7 in the morning, every day. I know that the construction's good for the city, and I get that, but the last time I was here and the other conversations that I've had with police officers and members of this council kind of seemed like we were going to get some relief in that, of just give us the weekend, something that, so we have more right to our peace than they do. You know, right now they can be out there from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Well, they're out starting at 6, so they're out longer than they need to be anyway. But there are more hours in the day and more hours in the week that they have a right to disturb our peace than we have to have our peace. And I don't think that's right. And I hope the council will reconsider making Saturday a working day and maybe say something to the chief of police so that when people call with a violation of any ordinance, not even just this one, that there's not somebody behind the scenes saying and telling the police officers, you're not supposed to cite those people. And we've asked, you know, I've got a teenage son, and we've asked them if he's pulling through the neighborhood with his radio blaring, you going to cite him? Well, sir, what's the difference of a backhoe working 30 yards behind the house or some kid blaring his radio 30 yards in front of the house? What's the difference? I don't think there is one. But again, I hope the council will reconsider making the weekends working days and hopefully give law enforcement a little more teeth in enforcing the city ordinances. That's all.
Thank you. So first of all, I think one of the reasons when this issue was brought up that we started talking about this to begin with was so that we could have an ordinance with more teeth. That was one of the things Mr. Otto had brought up multiple times, was the idea of not having any type of consequence if a contractor was there. So I think the discussion is when I thought we removed Sunday. Is it Monday? Is it 7 days a week, or is it just through Saturday?
Just through Saturday. From what I gather, we're just adding Saturday.
Yeah, that we're just adding Saturday. So I think Sunday's not on the table as part of this. So we had moved it back to 7 a.m. And I know that we had issues with being there at 6 a.m. I think all of us agreed that 6 a.m. was too early. And one of the things we talked about last time was, and there was agreement of all this council, was that 7 a.m. doesn't mean that a concrete truck pulls up at 6:15 or 6:30, turns it on, and lets it heat up and warm up for 30 minutes in front of your house while they're waiting to go to work. So 7 o'clock means they're not on site. They might be on site, but they're not working. They're not making noise. They're not disturbing the peace any earlier than 7 o'clock. And we've talked to the city manager. The city manager made it very clear to the police chief that under this new ordinance, there is teeth, and there will be citations written if that's the case. So in terms of the weekend, one of the issues that we had another resident that came and spoke. And when you look at the broad ordinance change, it doesn't just deal with new construction and new developments. It would deal with anybody who's working Monday through Friday and doesn't have time to work on a project at home until the weekend. Okay. So if they're outside, then if we just made a broad, because we talked about that.
All right. So the Mayor Jeff Gore goes on to elaborate more on why the ordinance is there and what they can do more. You guys can check it out at www.hhoh.org. Check it out. On that same meeting, I got to point this out for those listening. There's probably not many listening at this point, but anyway, at the beginning of this meeting, they promoted a police officer Ben Holbrook. Ben Holbrook. Him and Officer Pluma. Yeah, I'm going to say it. They pulled over my son in 2015. Holbrook's now a sergeant in the Huber Heights Police Department. Douchebag. Anyway, they pulled over my son in 2015. Why do I remember that year? Because I was running for city council in 2015. My son got pulled over. His whole carload, my nephew, who happens to be biracial, was pulled out of the car. My son was pulled out of the car, and supposedly, I had the DVD. I still have the DVD because I did a public records request for the dash cam. So I have it. They pulled them all out of the car. It was my son, one of his friends, and my nephew. They pulled them all out of the car, and they were trying to search the car. But since I am a liberty-loving SOB, I've taught my son from a young age to know his rights. So when the police officer asked if he could search the car, my son said, no. And they got belligerent. This new Sergeant Officer Holbrook. I got that. It was hilarious. Anyway, so my son asked, hey, can I call my dad? And Officer Pluma, or Plumba, or whatever the heck that dude's name was. I don't even know if he still works there. Probably not. If the stories that I heard about that guy, he probably doesn't work in Huber Heights anymore. He may. I don't know. There were several tickets given that night. So my son asked if he could call his dad. I had custody of him. He was living with me. And he asked if he could call his dad. And the officer said, no, you can't. Well, when he got out of his car, he told the officer, no, you can't search my car. So when he said that, because he knew his rights, because he was trained that way, the officer assumed he had drugs in his car. And that's all on the DVD. I should put it up. I should put it up on True. I don't know. I might. I don't know. But anyway, he didn't have drugs in his car. But he ended up being told not to call me. He ended up figuring out a way to call me, and I made my way up to, he was pulled over in front of Domino's right there on Brant Pike. Domino's across the street from, the old Golden Q drug castle where it's now U-Haul. And he was pulled over on the side where Domino's is. Because I pulled in right at Domino's and got out and was like, hey, what's going on? And the officer was like, this is a traffic stop, blah, blah. And that was your new sergeant at Huber Heights, Officer Holbrook. And I was asked today, because when I reviewed the video, I was like, oh, that's the guy that pulled over my son when I was running for city council. And I always wondered, was that because I was running and the former chief of police that was the current city manager that now left as city manager, but maybe retired, but possibly was fired, but don't know because he got a golden parachute as he left. Anyway, it was a strange situation. I'm sorry I didn't explain it as much as I want, but I just saw that officer that pulled my son over was promoted to sergeant. Every ticket that they gave my son that night, they gave him like 3 or 4 tickets, was thrown out in court. My son paid court cost and rolled out. There you have it. I don't know. Was it because I was running for city council at the time? I don't know. I say no, but who knows? Who knows? All right. Next item on Huber Heights city government.
And then just a final subject, actually good timing, Mr. Shaw, that I wanted to touch base with council on is regarding the water system and the 2022 budget. Council, as you recall, you received an email from me over the weekend, and I wanted to touch base on a couple of things, and I thought this was the most appropriate time to do that, to kind of set the tone, I think, for later in the meeting. So, as you are all aware, and for those who may not otherwise be aware, Council made the investment this year to line some water main within a few particular neighborhoods. And within the last 45 days, we've seen 2 breaks in the area where we lined. And so I want council to know that we're taking this issue very seriously and that we are looking forward to resolving whatever this particular issue is and making sure that we're continuing to make good investments with the city's money. And this particular project, the contractor has not yet invoiced the city for the work, so we have not paid for this work. And so we are looking into this particular matter as to why the water main broke, as is the contractor. We are running 2 independent investigations to see if we can determine similar results or to find out whether or not we're going to have differing opinions. Lining does help the pipe resist certain types of breaks, but it does not help resist all types of breaks. So we need to determine what caused this pipe to break and whether or not this was something the liner was supposed to help. We've had some dialogue. Council's had significant dialogue at this table, and so I want to talk about what we as staff are doing with this particular issue moving forward based on that dialogue. A little later tonight, we're going to make a more detailed presentation, but over the last few weeks, staff has gone back and we've identified $500,000 worth of additional revenue that we have put into the budget for improving the water infrastructure in 2022. We've also identified another $300,000 in revenues that can be put towards improving water infrastructure in 2023 and every year beyond. We've also identified and included in this budget $100,000 for a utility system integrity study, is what we're calling it. And I want to just talk about that study for just one moment. I know Mr. Shaw, the last time that we were together, and Mr. Campbell, I know were very vocal in their disappointment that this study was not done previously. And I know that there was other disappointment expressed on this council. So I want everyone to know that we've heard that. And I want to offer my apologies to you all that we didn't have that work done when we should have had that work done. And so we have put this money in the budget so that we can get this work done. The message that council sent was heard by me. It was heard by staff. And we are going to take this matter very seriously, and we're going to deliver to you this product as soon as we can. To that, we are already reaching out to firms, engineering firms in the region, to talk to them about what it is we are going to RFP, what our expectation is, and what we're looking to do with that. So we've already made connection with 4 firms, and we've continued to reach out to other firms. Right now, our tentative schedule is to bring forward in the last meeting in January, the RFP, seeking your permission to release that. And then we anticipate bringing to you the award of that at the first meeting in March. So our goal and our objective is to get this done, to get it done as quickly as we can, and deliver it to you so that you can make effective decisions with the information that this study is going to present when it comes to utilizing the money that is in the 2022 budget and utilizing the money going forward. So I commit to you that the seriousness of this project will involve me throughout this process. So this is not going to be something that I'm going to ask the city engineer to do on his own. This is not something I'm going to ask anyone else in the organization to do on their own. Because of the seriousness of your message to me and because of the seriousness of this issue to this community, I will continue to be a participant from start to finish on this process to make sure that the motivation that is needed to get this done is there, and that the importance of this issue may not necessarily be vocalized by me, but my presence and involvement in this project should demonstrate its importance to staff and the consultants that we work with. So I want you to be aware of that as we move forward and as we talk through this issue.
Well, that's not something you've heard in a while. He said the buck stops with him. That's good. That's real good. A city manager who is taking responsibility. Huh. You haven't had that in a while in the city of Huber Heights. It's been a long while. That's good. You got a good interim city manager, Huber Heights. I look forward to seeing what else this city manager, interim city manager, brings forward. Along the water issue, and we've talked about that here on Truman's Town Hall with candidates and candidates who have won elections, Anita Kitchen being one. Here's a few things. Let's read. Over on Brick City Town Hall, the premier political page for Huber Heights, there was a poster who posted over there on Brick City Town Hall, the Facebook page. The latest water main breaks happened on Hubbard in the same location as another break, and just a few feet from yet another break. You can see the patches on the road. This is a lasagna with multiple layers. You have crumbling water pipes. You have a street that we all paid to have paved in 2020. You have patches to newly paved streets over crumbling water pipes. You have patches over the patches. Now we have a newly paved street with patches on patches that is literally heaving because of water main breaks. Key for scale. We haven't even gotten into freeze and thaw season. Would you live like this? Let's talk about what happens inside each home. The wear and tear on water heaters and pipes and plumbing inside each home. We are really doing our fellow citizens dirty by pretending this isn't a problem. By the way, we don't need more apartments in this area. I couldn't agree more. This received 77 comments as of today. A councilwoman chimed in with a citizen. A new council person chimed in. A former mayor chimed in on this thread on Brick City Town Hall. One of the regular douchers chimed in. Oh, did I say that out loud? I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. Ladies and gentlemen, water issues are a problem in the city of Huber Heights. If you don't believe me, call around to all the cities that you can think of right now in Ohio. Call Dayton, call Cincinnati, call Columbus, call the big cities, and ask them, how many water main breaks have you had this year? I guarantee Huber Heights has had the most breaks, the most water main breaks in the state of Ohio. I would bet this can of 7-Up Zero Sugar. I would bet this can of 7-Up Zero that Huber Heights has had more water main breaks than any city in Ohio. I would bet that. Wake up. Wake up, America. Remember that? We're going to end the podcast with Earl Pitts. Pay attention, folks. If you're living in Huber Heights, pay attention. Nobody's paying attention. They had, like, I mentioned this. They had roughly 4,000 people vote in a 42,000 person city. 4,000 of them voted. Wow. Wake up, America!
You know what makes me sick? You know what makes me so angry? I just want to suck the juice out of the gas station squeegee. You hear about they had that robbery in progress down at Gas and Go this morning? Yeah, I filled up. That's what you call highway robbery anymore. Now, I might be the only guy left on earth that likes to buy my gas the old-fashioned way, $3 at a time. And don't call me cheap neither, because used to be $3 a gas cost me 10. Sure, once you added in a cup of coffee, 2 chocolate donuts, a sausage biscuit, a package of Hostess Snowball, and 2 packs of smokes, hell, these prices keep going up. I'm going to look like that Ally McBeal chick, 'cause I ain't eating nothing no more. The way gas prices are going, by next month, I'm going to be bumming. Bumming a smoke or bumming a ride. I can't afford both. So anyhow, I don't know what come over me this morning, but I pulled in there and I filled up. And I got to tell you, I ain't used to people taking that kind of money off me without at least knocking me over the head with a pipe first. I seen them dollar numbers spinning on that pump. I got on my knees twice to see if the gas was running out of the bottom of the tank. $27. $27 for a fill-up. I wasn't even on E. Now, I ain't one of them sky is falling, the mafia killed Kennedy conspiracy nitwits. But don't it seem kind of funny to anybody but me that soon as we get two big oil bozos up in the White House, we're looking at $3 a gallon for gas? Hello? I say something smells pretty fishy around here. And I used to like stuff that smelled fishy. Not this. Wake up, America!